right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Saturday Night Rabbit Hole. Trying to stop this program right there. And I got a new soundboard, so bear with me because it's a little bit different to work, and I'm trying to accommodate the differences and to get it to be presentable for everybody. So, well, let me see. What is this? Is this on? Pause that. All right. Shut that down. And I'm going to put that on here. And we're going to see if this. Okay, it didn't hear a sound. All right, we'll try this one. All right, cool. It's working. All right, got to put the commercial in, the initial commercial.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's an important one, yeah. Let's see here. Share my screen. I understand. Don't show me again. I updated my system, so it's a little new. Yeah. Show on stream. Alrighty then. And make sure you subscribe, like, and follow. Hit the bell button, get notified. And love y'all. Thank you for your tips and your subscriptions. They help me continue this. And now, without further ado, I did hear a little bit about Iceland something or other. I don't know if that's real or not real anymore. But did you hear anything? An event that was happening in Iceland?
No, I didn't hear anything unless it happened since I went to the birthday party.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was earlier, so oh crap. Just hit the wrong button. Add camera. All right. Do not add camera. Damn thing. No. I can't. It blanks my screen, so I can't do anything. I want to share, man. Share. All right. Screen share. What the heck? It changed. Add audio, screen, video to stream. No video. All right, good. Damn it. There we go. Screen. There we go. Changed. There's something. They did an update. It changed. Sorry. So we're going to talk about the Elsinore fault tonight. And you have a link there. I'll be sharing this link.
Yeah,
there we go.
Put it in again. Yeah.
Okay, good. So without further ado, here's Gana. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Elsinore tonight, and what I'm going to do is explain it first, and then it's the various other faults that they determine now are connected to it, and then after that I'll talk about a bunch of different quakes that have happened on it, and I'll explain where a couple or two or three of them came from, and then I don't know how long it'll take us. We'll see. Might be quicker tonight. But
You never know.
I've said that before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I haven't
see
had
how
my
it goes.
candy yet, so I'm waiting.
Yeah. I decided to have fruit station since I already had
Oh.
ice cream Oreo cake. So I decided I better go with healthy choice tonight for my snack.
A healthy choice, yeah.
Yeah.
Fruit sensation. It seems like a song to me too. Something sensation was a song. Yeah. Throw that out of my way. All right. So to start with, you want to have a USGS map or the other map that I have here? Let's go like that. Share this instead.
Well,
Right.
it's basically the next major fault.
Right. See, here's the San Jacinto fault, and here is
from
the
San Jacinto.
right.
Basically.
This is the Elsinore fault. There's a splay up here, goes into Ramona, and then the rest of it goes up into east, well, way up into the top.
Yeah.
I think there's multiple sections of this. Verdugo is part of the Whittier fault, which is part of the Elsinore fault. The Chino fault is part of the Elsinore fault.
Yeah. It talks about Verdugo and some of the different
right.
faults.
Glen Ivy is part of that fault. Windamar is part of that fault. Willard's part of that fault. So it is a fault zone, multiple faults along a fault zone. So expanding that idea that like the San Jacinto, the Elsinore has multiple, it's a fault zone rather than just a single fault.
Yeah, so there's other faults that they've identified that are part of it. Same as like what we did with San Jacinto.
Right.
Because it has the multiple segments.
Right? Yeah. So
it's the same idea. It's just not as many as what San Jacinto would have. Yeah. Until it has more quakes on it and they find
right.
more stuff, right?
Well, it looks like Verdugo runs into the, what is this? San Fernando fault or Mission Hills, and then Santa Susana Mountains. That's what fault's at. The Oak Ridge Mountains, Oak Ridge Fault. That's a pretty darn big one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to spread it too far because then it's going to get...
Right, I know, we'll get bogged down. The 1971 earthquake is at the very top. And if you follow that line down, you get to the Verdugo, and then you're passing the Raymond, which is a major fault we talked about, three ones ago? Yep. Hollywood and Raymond fault. See how they're connected? And this is why we're doing this, because we talked about the east-west faults and the main ones going across underneath the San Gabriel Mountains and the Santa Monica Mountains we talked about. We talked a little bit about Rancho Palo Verdes in the greater Los Angeles area and the different faults that go up through there. But today we're talking about the Elsinore fault, which is just the backside of the Santa Ana Mountains. That in the line fire that we just had, I don't know if it's still going. It probably is. But Southern Cal just had a bunch of rain, so I don't really know if it's still burning.
I don't know. I haven't looked today.
I haven't looked either. I spent 5 hours trying to get this thing to work today. So I'm like, I'm a little spent. But all right, so where do you want to start, bud?
Well, we're just going to do this Wikipedia article first on the Elsinore fault. And then I'll add more stuff to it and put other links in there.
All right, bud. Just
keep going for however long it takes us to do it.
All right. You want to read it or should I?
Doesn't matter. Either one of us can do it.
All right.
So I'll do it. Or you do like the first.
Yeah, the first couple
there.
Yeah. The Elsinore Fault is a large lateral strike slip geologic fault structure in the Southern Cal. The fault is part of the trilateral split of the San Andreas Fault. Well, I didn't know about a trilateral split. Wow. system and one of the largest, though quietest, faults in Southern Cal. The Elsinore Fault Zone, not including Whittier, Chino, or Laguna Salada faults, is 180 kilometers or 110 miles long, with slip rate of 4 millimeters a year, or 0.15 inches a year. It is estimated that the zone is capable of producing quakes 6.5 to 7.5 in magnitude. The projected interval between major ruptures is 250 years. The last major rupture event as the main Elsinore Fault was 1910, with a magnitude 6 earthquake centered just northwest of the city of Elsinore, Lake Elsinore.
And I'll just say a little bit more about that right now.
Go ahead.
That is basically when that happened. That's when they learned about the fault and they decided to give it a name. So based upon where it was, because it was right by Lake Elsinore, that's why they gave the fault that name. And then they added the other strands to it later. Because they found, I'll explain it more, but they found those other strands when there was notable quakes on them. And then they figured out, oh, well, there's a fault here because there was a quake on it. So then later on, they figured out that they were all connected to the Elsinore.
All right. Let me finish the segment of geography here. The fault runs from the mountains of the peninsular ranges between El Centro and San Diego, northwest to Chino Hills and Chino Hills Range. On the southern end of the fault zone is the southeastern extension of the Elsinore Fault Zone, the Laguna Salada Fault. At its northern end of the Elsinore Fault splits into two segments, the Chino Fault and the Whittier Fault. In the Elsinore Trough, the Elsinore Fault Zone creates a 4 graben rift valleys between the Santa Ana Mountain Block and the Paris Block, the Temescal Valley and the Elsinore Valley, with its large sag pond of Lake Elsinore, and the Temecula Valley and Wolf Valley. In Elsinore Trough, the fault zone is split into two pairs of parallel strands, with the Glen Ivy to the north and Lee Lake Fault forming the first valley, the Glen Ivy South Fault and the Willard faults, the second, and Willard and the Wildermer faults, the last two valleys to the southeast. A multi-year study published in 2018 suggested that the connection between the Elsinore Fault and the other fault lines farther south in Mexico, observations of the Yuha Desert and Salton Trough suggest that the 2010 7.2 Mayer Cucapá earthquake rupture, the Laguna Salada Fault in Baja California, Mexico, and the Elsinore Fault in California are part of the same fault system. There you go. So
I'll just mention right now on that, the 1892 quake, which we talked about in the last episode on San Jacinto, was basically in the same spot as the 2010 Baja quake. And they're both the same size, but I'll talk about them more later.
Okay.
Because I kind of want to explain what the lead up was to each one. So, but I'll get to that later. So, this is the overriding thing, the whole Elsinore fault together. So, now I'm going to talk about that 1910 quake. So, I have another link for that one that I'm going to put in there. Right. That says stuff about it, so everybody will know what we're referring to.
I'm trying to do research as well, just as we're talking to, regarding the Elsinore Fault here. The Saturn Mountain Block, I never heard of that. And graben is kind of the ups and downs, of a normal fault. We get the hoist and graben. That means it's shoot, I don't have all my. Yeah, see, I'm still not 100% set. I hate that. Because I'm not all together from the setup, but I'm waiting on you. So did you put it in there for them?
Yeah, I think it came up there.
All right, let me check it.
It's the Caltech one.
Share this instead. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it just gives like the information on the quake. So I'm going to read it off. So it says type of faulting, but we already know that, right? Lateral strike slip. So it was on May 15th, 1910 at 7:47 a.m. Pacific time. And then it gives the location and just a bit northwest of Lake Elsinore, about 15 miles, 24 kilometers. And they think it was a magnitude 6. But when I looked up more on it, they were kind of undecided about that. But that's what they thought it might be a high 5 too. But in the end, they put it at magnitude 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that happened in 1910, I see.
Yeah. So 4 years after San Fran.
Preceded by moderate foreshocks April 10th, May 12th, and May 15th, 1910. Earthquake was not particularly strong or damaging quake, though it did topple chimneys in Corona, Temescal, and Wildomar, and caused some alarm among the citizens of Los Angeles and San Diego, as well as those in towns closer to the epicenter. What is notable about this quake is that the best estimates place it in the epicenter somewhere along the Elsinore Fault, a fault zone along which no other earthquakes as large or as greater than magnitude 6 have been historically recorded. Estimate of the location of magnitude of this quake are by no means precise, but seem to indicate a quake of roughly magnitude 6 in the vicinity of Temescal Valley, northwest of Lake Elsinore. So, Temescal Valley, I think is Marietta, but let me find it right here. Where's the lake? There's Salton Sea. Here's Corona. Oh, it's the lake's here.
Yeah. So once I do, when I get one of those dates, so in this case, May 15th, 1910, I start working backwards.
Right.
So then I just did a search for other notable quakes around that same time. That's how I started.
Temescal Valley, Lake Matthews right here. Here's the 91 freeway. Temescal Valley is right along the 91 freeway. So it was this region that had the earthquake. Okay. Just south of Miraloma, south of Corona, where Lake Matthews is. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing I found when I started doing that search, so the first thing that came up that was very close in time period to that, I'm going to put the link in there right now.
All right.
Which I thought was super interesting. Show copy.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I think it went. Yeah.
All right. Another Wikipedia.
So there was all these crazy.
Share this tab. Okay, 1910, Costa Rica had an earthquake where a series of destructive seismic events that affected Cartago, Costa Rica from April 13 to May 4th. Sequence began with a 5.8 magnitude. The largest and most destructive sequence occurred on May 4th, measuring a 6.4, and a total of 2,450 people were killed in the city of Cartago. Was severely affected. The impact April 13th quake damaged many homes in Cartago and surrounding towns. Some buildings collapsed, and few others were so badly damaged that it was unsafe to enter. Public infrastructure and churches were extensively cracked. Military barracks and the Moreno Fernandez building of Cartago was demolished in San Jose. Okay. So big quake in Costa Rica.
Well,
and that happened at the same time.
Yep. Because if you read about the foreshocks to the Elsinore one,
right,
they were happening at the same time that the foreshocks to all this one was happening. Now, I thought that was interesting because it's similar to what it did with Ridgecrest in 2019 because there was a
Yeah,
big quake
and when
down
there's a
there by
connection to
Buster.
Texas too. I wonder, did you do anything into West Texas?
No, I never went that far. I just stuck right on the west coast, going up and down. Because
Welcome, Luke.
what I did,
Yo.
because after I found that one, I did what I always do. I bring up the Wikipedia article that has all the quakes in 1910 on it, broken down by month, right? So I'm going to put that link in there next because I try and see how it got to that point, right?
Right. We're tracing the other quakes that seem to happen around the same time that appear to be situated northwest to southeast, and on what we call the Walker Lane theory of fault. So it too, the Walker Lane is a segmented group of fault zones that go from Alaska all the way to the tip of South America along these fault zones. And it's our belief or our hypothesis that these fault zones are connected or interconnected, and it's unique to watch how one portion will be activated and it will respond in another location. Similar magnitude, depending on how far away, it could be a little bit less, or it could be actually more, depending on if there's a crisscross fault or if the fault that breaks on that segment affects an adjacent fault. So, like Ridgecrest was a 6.5 or something, and a month before there was an 8 in Peru, and so we were watching very closely what was happening in northern. Going to go north, and I think if my memory correct, there was a Central America had a 6.5, and then Ridgecrest had the 6.5, but what happened with Ridgecrest is that it kicked off another fault that they didn't even know it could do that. And now scientists understand now one fault can kick off another fault. And so the next step for scientists is to see and take the step that we're kind of hypothesizing about, that fault zones, are segmented as well to a greater like Walker Lane for us is greater. It doesn't stop at the border of Mexico. For us, it goes all the way from Alaska down to South America for no other purpose, because it's long from Alaska to the border of Mexico. It for us, it continues. It didn't stop because the country starts and that kind of stuff. So I hope that laid a little bit more foundation for what we're trying to do here, what we're seeing. So while we're doing these studies, we're also hypothesizing and putting forth the idea that earthquakes aren't random. We all know there's pressure with plate tectonics, but it's like a river of broken ice, and they're not being smashed yet. But when there's a choke point, the plates smash against each other, and you can see on one end will pop up and the other end will go down, and then it will also react with another plate and do the same thing. So that's kind of what we're seeing, and just using our observation, and that's kind of what we're doing here. All right. So secondarily, but first, we're still learning about the Elsinore fault. We know where it is. We know the last big quake on it was a 6-ish. And now in 1910, we have a 6.4 here in Costa Rica, and also a 5.8.
Yeah. And so now I put the link in there for the quakes in 1910 that's under Wikipedia. Right. So what I do in those, like once I find all these other dates, I just bring Wikipedia up because it starts, they put like everything in there starting in 1900, so it makes it way easier for me to find the information. So what I usually do, I take the date and I go backwards. But so now I'm into this, so I look at what happened in January of 1910. Now, once you scroll down, you'll see Honduras, Central America, had a 7.1 on January 1st, 1910.
Right. Well, shoot,
So I
not
said,
just
well, that's pretty,
Honduras. Iceland popping,
yeah, I know.
Trinidad, Tobago.
Yeah, because
I don't know where Trinidad is.
Trinidad and Tobago's Texas
Caribbean.
liniment.
Yeah.
6.9. So I thought
All
that
right.
was pretty. So I just look at that month and I said, well, look, there's all the liniments we're trying to identify. It was all getting sevens, basically, at the end of it. So
Yeah, the Iceland had a 7. Trinidad Tobago, which is a Caribbean, it had a 7.
yeah,
I
so this
wonder
is
what
all.
was happening internal U.S. if Trinidad Tobago had a 7.
Well, I'd have to.
The depth on that Trinidad Tobago was
dig into
100,
that
though.
more.
That's pretty deep. Go ahead, bud.
Yeah. So I'd have to dig into it more to find out what it was doing.
Right.
Like across the rest.
Costa
of the
Rica had the
states.
6.4. Bristol Bay, Alaska. Where's Bristol Bay, Alaska? That had a 6.6, bud.
Yeah, well, that's part of the northern component. Right?
Then you have the northern East Pacific Rise had a 7. Wow. Yeah. And that's in May.
A lot of 7s that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's getting crazy stuff.
Right.
So I kept going down through.
Freaking Oregon. Oregon in August had a 6.6.
Yeah. But of course, I was just going to May, right? Because I wanted to see what it did on the way to the Elsinore quake. So I never carried it on after.
Well, you have in September you have Oaxaca, Mexico with a 6.7. The Adriatic Islands had a 7.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I thought that was super
very
interesting. All that
very
stuff
interesting.
happened.
Yeah.
Lead up to it. So that's the 1910 story because I never went any farther than that.
October, Chile had a 7 too.
Yeah, so it didn't take me too long to figure out like where it came from.
And a 7.1.
That up.
Crazy, dude. The whole thing was bouncing from Alaska all the way down that whole year.
Yeah.
I mean, so was New Zealand and the other side, yeah. Taiwan. I see a lot of Taiwans. New Hebrides. I don't know where the hell that is.
Indonesia. PNG.
Okay.
New Hebrides, I think, is over there.
Okay. Yeah, it said that place was rocking and rolling with big ones. Gosh. The Kermitics were bouncing. PNG was bouncing. Fiji was bouncing. Taiwan. Spain. I don't know what Elbor Sea. Where the hell is that? Okay. Kurils were bouncing.
Yeah, because I usually find whenever like a notable one happens, there's always all sorts of other crazy stuff going on.
Right.
That's
Taiwan had an 8.1. Frack in April. Wow.
Yep. So I did that one, and then I decided, since that's the most obvious one, I said, well, I'm going to go back and break down the other parts of the Elsinore fault.
Correct.
So now I'm going to do Whittier.
All right.
So I'll put that one in.
I think I have that one. The Whittier Narrows earthquake. I have it.
I just want the one that talks about the fault.
Fine. That's fine.
Because I'm going to explain the other earthquakes on it. because I have somebody actually did all of them for the 20th century for Whittier Fault.
You're right. Go right. Yeah, that year was freaking insane.
Okay, now I gotta put this in here. The Whittier Wikipedia article is super short, but
Yeah.
the one about the quakes on it is going to be way longer.
Yeah, I have one that's got the quake on it, the Whittier Narrows quake, but
yeah, that's just
share
the
this up.
most recent one. Did it put the right one in? No, never copied my other one. Copy it again.
I got it in there.
You got it already?
List of 1910 earthquakes.
No, this one is about the Whittier Fault.
All right.
So I gotta get
the last article, last thing you put up there came out the 1910.
Yeah, it copied my one I had before.
Right.
Did it do it that time, or is it not copying? There, it did it that time.
All right. Yeah, Whittier Fault. Share this tab. All right. All right. Whittier Fault is a geologic fault located eastern Los Angeles County in Southern California that is one of the upper two branches of the Elsinore Fault zone, with the Chino Fault the second. So it's a split. Whittier goes left, Chino goes right. We showed you those before.
Yeah,
Okay, so right here. Here's the Chino, and here's the Whittier. All right.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
So now I'm gonna put the next link in because it talks about all the quakes that happened on the Whittier section.
All right. The Whittier Fault is 40 kilometers, 25 miles right lateral strike slip that runs along the Chino Hills Range between the cities of Chino Hills and Whittier. The fault has a slip rate of 2.5 to 3 millimeters a year. That's 0.1. Yeah. 0.11. No, way less, is a tenth of an inch a year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, 0.118. It is estimated that the fault could generate a quake of 6 to 7.2 on the moment magnitude scale. That's the Whittier Fault, part of the Elsinore Fault Zone. I think many of us who lived in Southern Cal, all we talk about, oh, yes, the Elsinore Fault. Well, it's kind of like talking about the San Jacinto Fault. They're fault zones, much like the San Andreas Fault Zone. It's a series of interconnected faults that make up a zone, and that's what we're talking about here. So the Chino and the Whittier.
Well, a lot of people, that's all they know is the main players.
Right.
They hear about all the time,
Right. Yeah, sinkholes are pretty unique, Eden. So generally, it's an undercut, something down below, or a cavern that's opened up, and whatever sinks in, and you don't want to be in one. That's all. Didn't change how we measured the 80s or something. Yeah, we're going to get there, Flutter Girl. We're going to move north after we hit San Diego after this, and probably we'll hit the Santa Rosa Fault, and that's where we'll start in San Diego next time. But we are moving north. We're going to take care of Southern Cal.
We're going to go off the coast, SoCal, and then start going up.
Correct. Through Lompoc, all the way up to Central Cal, Northern Cal, and then all the way up into Washington. And
because there was large quakes in NorCal in 1892 too, but I'm not going to get into that now. So
Yeah, we'll get bogged down. So we're trying to stay disciplined. I know I kind of throw him off a little bit. I'm waiting for you to drop the other link in. Did you drop the other link?
yeah, it's there.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. All right. Yeah, this is a great article here. Yeah, the 20th century Whittier Fault quakes. The first earthquake attributed to the Whittier Fault and felt strongly in the Whittier area was an earthquake on July 8th, 1929 at 8:45 in the morning, an estimated 4.7. It was believed to located, that's where it was believed to be located. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for subbing. Which had a $50,000 to $350,000 of damage. It also felt very strongly in Los Nietos, Santa Fe Springs area, where people were injured. 4 people were injured. Wow. It is very likely that the earthquake was located on the Norwalk Fault or even on the recently discovered 1999 Point of Hills Fault system that runs from the Coyote Hills in North Orange County toward the Brea to the east to downtown Los Angeles toward the west through Los Angeles, Nietos, Santa Fe Springs area, with distinct segments underneath LA City, Santa Fe Springs, and Coyote Hills. Several seconds of shaking were reported being felt in Los Angeles and the suburbs for a 50-mile radius around the epicenter. See, the one quake kind of shook because it's connected. They're interconnected. And in looking at that and showing this again, what they're saying, here's the Norwalk fault zone right here. So here's the Whittier fault. So the belief is that somehow it was in this area that quake, the first quake that they found on out here, that's what they're talking about. So the next strong quake in the area, June 15, 1967, centered east of Whittier, had a magnitude of 4.1 and was felt in a rolling quake throughout much of Los Angeles basin, parts of Orange County, knocking objects off shelves, causing
now I
minor
want
damage.
to talk about 29 first because I've already done
All right.
extensive stuff on that already.
Okay, which one? 19?
Yeah, do 1929 first.
All right, I didn't see it here.
Yeah,
It's a long article.
Yeah, the first one that you read. So I just want
Okay,
to
go ahead.
talk about 1929 before we get going on.
Yeah, July 8th, 1929, 8:45 was a 4.7.
Yep. So that same year was the year there was a 7.2 off of Newfoundland, the Grand Banks quake that made a tsunami that hit Newfoundland. So see, here we are again. It's the same pattern.
Yeah, the coming off of where Canuck lives and coming directly from northeast to southwest. And then he's correlating this because what he said is there's the St. Lawrence lineament goes
all the way down through,
all the way through at an angle that goes right through there, that area. Well, does it splay when it hits the chicken leg knuckle, or because it goes through to Hermosillo in Mexico, but this is several.
Yeah, but I want to explain that it's.
Go ahead.
Like the lineaments are all active. So there was also a 5.8 that year in Attica, New York.
Oh.
So it's coming down.
New York.
What was that, before or after the Newfoundland quake?
I think Newfoundland was in between. How it worked, there was, because I haven't told you the other one, there was a 6.2 right by Reykjavik that same year. So I think it went, if I remember right, it goes 6.2 Reykjavik, then 5.8 Attica, then the 7.2 was in between at Grand Banks, Newfoundland quake. So it kind of made a triangle once again.
All right, so Attica is upstate New York next to Buffalo.
Yeah.
All right, so what he's suggesting is Attica's like out here. Here's Buffalo. What he's suggesting is up here. This is New Brunswick. This is Newfoundland. There was an earthquake somewhere out here that created a tsunami, and it traveled. The energy traveled down here, created upstate New York, another earthquake, and because it's on that same line, he's watching it go right through St. Louis, down into. Well, I guess you're going to curve it down into Southern Cal.
Well, I just want to show you that line is those lines
Okay.
are active, right? That's all.
Right. Chihuahua and then Hermosillo right through here.
Well, when I started studying the Haida Gwaii quakes, guess what I found out?
Haida Gwaii quakes.
There was a gigantic Haida Gwaii quake in
Right.
1929, and it was in the exact same spot as what we just had, the 6.6.
Right off the coast here, Haida Gwaii.
Yes.
Haida Gwaii.
And it was like 7374.
Wow. So
like I'm recreating like what it's doing again, because I've seen this so many times, right?
Yeah.
And so
once you start seeing these things, it's like it doesn't seem logical, but because we're looking at invisible things, a northwest to southeast lineament triggered a northwest to southeast lineament. So northeast to southwest triggered a northwest to southeast lineament. That's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah.
So this one out here happened over here because this one here travels this direction and then this direction. And because of this one down here, along that Walker Lane that goes all the way down here into Chile, from up here was triggered, and it had a big one. How far apart were they, bud?
Well, I forget the exact date for the.
Okay, 1929.
Yeah, but I can bring it up because I just got to
look at it.
Go to the Wikipedia article.
1929.
Because for this one, I didn't have to do too much searching because I'd already done 1929 before, so I remembered what ones I looked up before.
Okay, I got it right here. List of earthquakes, 1929. Canada, Newfoundland had a 7.2. That's what you're talking about, November 18.
Yeah, so it was more towards the end of the year.
Haida Gwaii had it. Okay, so Haida Gwaii may have triggered the other one because Haida Gwaii happened May 26th, and it was a 7.3.
So that's what, almost 5 months there?
Yeah.
6 months almost?
Well, see, in geologic time, that's relatively quick.
Yeah, that's just a blink of an eye, geological.
Right. And then yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. The Adrenal Islands were popping too. 7-0
if you start looking.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So if you start looking down through the list beginning in January, you'll see Venezuela was going off 6.7.
Okay, here we go. Venezuela was going off. That's on the eastern side of South America, and that would be the Texas lineament area. Sucre state. I don't know. I don't know where exactly that was. Let me see if I can. Okay, yeah, right there before the Caribbean. So, stands to reason that was a Texas lineament right there.
Yeah, and then Central the next Alaska, one you notice in there Guatemala. Is United States, Central Alaska 6.2.
Right, in Guatemala 6.9. Moving on up. So 6.7 to 6.9. In the middle was Alaska pumping up. All right.
Yep. So there, next month, you move on to February.
Guatemala again.
Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Yeah, Central Mid-Atlantic Ridge was going off too.
Right.
7.1. Northern Mid-Atlantic Ridge, 7.1. Which I think that was Yep.
Did that
And
create a
then you have,
tsunami on that one, Canuck?
yeah, it hit a fishing village in Newfoundland.
Okay.
Oh, so the northern mid-Atlantic was actually, that's the Newfoundland quake you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
All right.
And then the next one, well, it says there, Alaska Peninsula, 6.4.
Right, 6.4.
Then
Yeah.
you move on. Then you move on to
We got
March.
Guatemala happen at that same time in February. So it's Central America's popping, Alaska's popping, and then this interesting connection from the northern mid-Atlantic, central mid-Atlantic to the northern, and now it's, well, there's your triangle. The Aleutian Islands pop with a 7.8. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, like, it's super active before these smaller quakes happen.
And Guatemala too, 6.4.
Yeah.
Dang, Guatemala popping hard.
Yeah. And then I kept going down until I find.
There's the Haida Gwaii in May,
Haida Gwaii.
7.3.
And then you had Peru and Argentina going off.
Bang, bang. Both mid sixes.
Yep.
And then we go into June.
I just kept going
and then
down
June
through.
was a lot of Philippines.
Like the whole opposite side of the Pacific was like catching up.
Then Central Alaska really pounded hard, boy. Wow. 6.2, 6.57, 6.573. Holy smokes.
That's 5 of them right there, man.
Right. Just in 1 month.
Yeah.
Central Alaska. What, 1929?
Yep.
I have not seen an earthquake any kind of size like this in Central Alaska, the Adrenov Islands. So Adrenov Islands, wanted to quick look. I think those are, Adak, where Adak is, right before the rat's butt, right?
Yeah, all out around that.
Yeah, that's where Adak is. Yeah. Yeah.
And then down in September, Gulf of California is going off with a 6.
August. That's the other side again. September, Mexico, Gulf of Cali had a 6. Then Hawaii popped with a 6.4 the next month. And Chile started banging. 6.8 and a 6.0. Then November, Micronesia way over there. It's still Yap went off. So that's over by the Philippines, which Philippines was banging hard. Major 7s. Wow.
So to make Elsinore, Whittier.
And again, the northern Atlantic Ocean popped again.
Yeah.
1929 Grand Banks earthquake is one of the largest on record in this area. The earthquake generated a tsunami which affected Newfoundland, Canada. 20 people were killed. Yeah, we saw the after effect of that town in one of the documentaries we discussed.
Yep. So that was a lot of crazy stuff happening in 1929. So when the Elsinore fault went off for the first time, they think, in the 20th century.
And Alaska in December had a 7.8. So what do we have just this year? Let's see, let's trace it up again. By magnitude, Sandwich Islands popped with an 8.1. And that happened in June. The Aleutian Islands, 7.8, happened in March. 7.8 in Alaska again. There's 2 Alaskans, right? Yeah. 7.8. Boy. March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 9 months. separating 7.8s in Alaska. One was out there by the Rat Islands, and the other one was in near islands. So I don't know where the near islands are. It's not telling me. I hate these things when they do that.
I can't remember if it's more to the Kamchatka side. I forget.
All right. Near Islands, Pacific. Bering Sea. The Aleutian Islands. It's in the Aleutian Islands. Yeah, they're not showing me exactly where are they. Yeah. Saskatchewan Island. Near Island, Saskatchewan. None of these maps really show me where. Attu and okay, near the islands of Attu. Yeah, it's out there by the Adak again.
Yeah.
Oh, in 2017, that same island got a 7.7.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're talking already a
which
major quake.
Yeah, which was the same year Mexico had the 7 and the 8.1, but we don't want to get off on
Right.
that.
I know. I'm just seeing that. I'm seeing the correlations from that area down to Central America and Mexico. All right, 1929. All right, so we're 1929. A lot of stuff was happening, dude.
Yeah. So now, for the next two, the one it talks about in June 15th, 1967, I never went into that one since it was only a 4.1, but we're getting pretty close to like the same magnitude as the 4.7 one that was in 29.
All right.
Yeah.
So sum it up for me.
Well, that was in June 15. So if I was doing that right now, I'd start with that date and go backward.
June 8th, 1929 is the 4.7 in Whittier.
Yeah.
And then June 15, 1967, but June 8th, 1929, that's where we're working at. Yeah. And it's a date we know of a definite earthquake. We know the generalized area. And then we extrapolate that by looking out beyond and knowing where earthquakes happen in generally. And then we look at generally a year before, a year after, and try to say what's going on geologically.
I find it easier when it's like in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Because see, this next one is June 15th, 1967.
Correct. So let's look at 1967 then.
And we'll do this one live because I haven't done it. So I'll see. But I bet we're gonna
I'm already there. I'm already there. Show on stream. All right. So we're gonna figure out what's going on. So in that same year, several large earthquakes. Valenzuela had a 6.6. Colombia had a 7. Colombia had a 6.8. And that's it. So going by month.
Yeah. So in this case,
Argentina 6.2.
I do like the first.
Fox Island 6.8.
Yeah, so I bet you're going to see it's going to be a similar pattern to what we
in February. Colombia had the 7.
So South America is going crazy.
Ecuador has a 6. In March, April, nothing happened. May, Chile had a 6.1. June, Chile had a 6.2. July, South Alaska had a 6.5. The Fox Islands again 6.1. And Palau, okay, that's on the other side of the world. Colombia came in with a 6.8, and Valenzuela came with a 6.6. Those are kind of 1967 Caracas earthquake occurred. It was July 29th at 8 p.m. The epicenter took place and lasted 35 seconds. It heavily affected the areas such as Adamar and Palos Grandes. Wow. That was pretty damn. 300 people died in 1967 from the Venezuela, the Caracas quake.
So, like what we've done so far, it's similar to 29, except 29 had a lot more crazy stuff, right?
Right.
So this time it was only like a, whatever it was, 4.2 or 4.1.
6.7 here, yeah. And
Yeah,
Argentina, Chile,
on
6.2.
the Whittier Fault this time. So it wasn't as strong as the one that was in 29.
Right, but we're still seeing the same, like in October, like Nicaragua had a 7.1. I think Nicaragua, that's a super volcano. Slightly larger than the Lake Titicaca earthquake. So 7.1, that's pretty strong in that lake. Yeah. November, Ecuador had a 6.1. Chile had a 6.3. In December, Chile had a 7.3. Ooh. Chile had a 6.3, 6.7. So I don't know, and I don't feel cheated or anything, but we're seeing some pretty serious quakes happen back then.
It just wasn't as nuts as
Right.
1929.
29 was a particularly busy year.
Yeah. So if you were to plot these out, you would see what we're talking about. It's like, you have the world map and you put a peg on where all these earthquakes are happening that we're talking about here in the western, or it's the eastern part of the Pacific plate. Watching it go up and down northwest to southeast, and then again northeast to southwest. That's what we're saying. And it's along the main lineaments that these things are happening. It's like, okay, well, why aren't there earthquakes happen over here or over there? When you start to see the pattern persist, like bang, bang, bang. Say, all right. So somehow these things are interconnected. And just as earthquakes can, kick off a splay or a counter. I don't know what you call a fault that crosses another fault, but it's not a splay. It's just a straight where one fault crosses another. But we see that also in the electromagnetic world, which are controlled by, or the electromagnetic world is revealed to us through these lineaments. And these earthquakes are happening along these lineaments. And it's showing us that there's something invisible, that why these earthquakes are happening. And you can see them, working out, say, oh, it's going to be a 6.7 versus a 4.7. That's not what we're after. We're after the mechanism that gets triggered. And when that gets triggered, what it's triggering along these lineaments. And that's what we're saying. Large earthquakes say, okay, a big one happens here. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Did that energy pass out or be dispersed as it left the area? Or is a 6.7 like what happened to Ridgecrest when there's 10,000 earthquakes after that? And, in a short period of time, we watched several. It seemed that energy stayed there until it was dead, until it spent all that energy, because it was still moving. That's what was going on. The desert had to catch up from the rip.
is there a particular time cycle that these quakes are, is it an 18-year cycle? Is it a 52-year cycle? Is it a 1,000-year cycle that
Right.
we're noticing?
And that's another factor. And we don't have the triple decker brains like Canuck, but he has a pretty darn good, good memory.
Yeah,
And,
well, they basically say for all the Elsinore faults, so that's including these other segments, it goes off with a really big one every 250 years.
Right.
But
it's big ones like 6 something to 7.
Yeah, so like whatever said there,
250 years, yeah.
5 up, yeah. Which we haven't seen a 6.5 on there, like since they've been paying closer attention to it. So the closest it came was the 6 in 1910, right?
Right.
So
you know what's funny is California didn't get any large quakes in 1967. But
wasn't it Oregon and Mexico that got it or something?
Yeah, Peru, Argentina, Chile, banging pretty hard. Nicaragua got the big one, 7.1.
Yeah. Well, we can do the next one live too.
All right.
Look
What
it up.
year?
Because it was January 1st, 1976. So this one is tricky, see, because it's January 1st, 1976. So if you want to know what led up to it, you have to go 1975, right?
Because you're year before.
Yeah.
All right. But we're going to do this one as well. So 1975. All right. So what happened in 1975 along it, the northern Atlantic Ocean again, a 7.9.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because since we're doing this live, I never did it, but I bet you're going to find this. That's the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, we'll start with January. Nothing. Oh, Colombia had a 6.5. Then we had a Near Islands again. Listen, Near Islands again, 7.6. That's the Rat Islands, right near Rat Island. The Adrena Islands are right next to them, a 6.5. That was February. 2 big quakes in February. And in January, it was all on the other side of the world. In March, Chile popped to 6.9, Peru popped to 6.2, and then Idaho popped to 6.1.
Yeah,
Peru,
well, that's interesting.
Loreto region. Hold on, where the hell's the Loreto?
Idaho is the odd one out on that one.
I want to say the Loreto region was where the 8.1 happened in 2019, or was it not?
Well,
because Idaho happened that same year. Yeah, Idaho popped that same year. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that was at 6.5, wasn't it, in Idaho?
Yeah. Which was after Ridgecrest.
Right.
But I don't want us to get sidetracked on that right now.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Because that's
yeah, an 8.0 May 19th or May 26th of 2019. All right, Peru popped. And the Idaho. $6.5 happened
2020.
March 31st,
2020
of 2020. Yeah,
and Salt Lake City 5.7, 5.8 was around that.
Yeah, I thought it was 5.
So when I see Peru go big, I look for was it more interior versus toward the ocean? If it's toward the ocean, then it seems to go along the coast a little more. But if it's more interior, it kind of goes away from the coast.
Yeah, it comes up Walker.
Yeah,
leans more to Walker Lane side rather than the San Andreas
side. Yeah, and that's just observationally speaking, it's like, can we draw any conclusions? Can we forecast? No. But we're seeing some similarities. Venezuela 6-1 in April.
Well, when you see the usual
Guerrero
suspects
6-2.
time after time,
Yes. So
And
I bet
that's
we're
right.
going to see the same pattern again now that you're looking at
Yeah, there's another
75.
May, and we're looking at 1975 May, North Atlantic Ocean. Boy, why do we keep hitting this North Atlantic Ocean?
how big
We
was
did that
one?
from 1920, right? When we started this evening.
Yeah, because it's pushing North America, right?
7.3?
That's what it's
And it's
doing.
a 7.9. Remember the one that did the Newfoundland had the tsunami from the North Atlantic Ocean. This is
That was a
1975, doing the same thing. Bio Chile got a 7.7 that same time period. So what's going on with that one? Yellowstone popped with a 5.9 in June. We're looking at July now. Mexico, Gulf of Cali had a 6.5. Northern Cal comes in at a 5.7. Argentina 6.2 in August. September, nothing. October, nothing. Now I say nothing doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means nothing along the lineament. Hawaii, November, Hawaii, 1975, 7.7. Triggered a local tsunami with 2 deaths, being 19 people were injured. And the largest event in Hawaii since 1868. And I think, did it not kick off the volcano as well? 1975?
I imagine usually when it has a big quake, there's either Kilauea or Mauna Loa.
Yeah, and then December rounds off with a 6. And then you're saying in 1976, January
was the 4.2 on Whittier.
1976,
January 1, 76.
I'm not seeing it. They don't have it listed?
Well, it's in this.
Peru had a 6 in January.
Yeah, they don't have it listed because it's only a 4.2, right? In the big things.
All right.
Yeah, because we're going by this article.
Correct.
I don't know who did. He or she were listing all the ones that they know about from their research that were actually right on the Whittier Fault. Now, of course, the next one they're talking about.
Here. Yeah. I want to finish up the rest of the year for 76.
Okay. That first.
Yeah, because January you got the 4.7 and the Whittier, and that's kind of what we're going to the top of Elsinore Fault, which goes all the way down into the Laguna Salada, down into Mexico, Gulf of California, all the way down through the subduction zone off of Colima, and all the way down into Chiapas, Mexico, and then down through South America. So in January, Peru had a 6, so it's very small. Guatemala in February had a 7.5. Wow. I just can't imagine 7.5s, dude. I really just can't. Guatemala the next month had a 5.4. April, Ecuador 6.7. In May, Peru 6.6. And June, Mexico Guerrero 6.4. And July, Panama pops with a 6.7 and a 7.0.
Wow.
August, nothing in August. September, nothing there. October, nothing on there. November, off the coast of northern Cal is 6.3. So that 4.7 on the Whittier went to northern Cal off the coast, ends up with a 6.3. And Vancouver Island had a 6.7 in December.
So we took that one a year into the future from that
So what we did, looking in the past for 1 year, looking in the future for 1 year, seeing that little time spot, what do we see? Can we see it progress outward, or is the one quake that we've seen, is it just showing us that something else is happening along that lineament, that the stronger one would emanate out from it rather than in that spot? You kind of see what I'm saying? So if we got a crossing lineament, and at the junction, let's say earthquake happens, it'll translate both directions, both ways. But if it's up one segment or up the other segment, and the large one would happen, then we kind of look for the progression to go outward down that segment. But if it doesn't, then there's a plausibility that even a larger earthquake may happen along that lineament, and that it was a precursor, not just a local precursor like a foreshock local, but you can look at and extrapolate out further and say, okay, well, it's happening here in Peru at 6.7, but then up that lineament, you see in Guatemala, a 7.6. And then you see up in California, maybe a 4.5 or 5.
Yeah, like the whole thing is active, right?
Right. The whole lineament's active, and it's vibrating. And like we seen the vibrations, like if I did the
like when I do
tremors.
it, I'm primarily interested in where it's coming from to make it on that date.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go ahead another year if I want to connect it to another quake, but usually when I'm doing, I want to find out where it came from in the last year. But now that I've done so many, I can see how other years connect to other years, right? Because I've looked up so many now.
Right.
So when it talks about the next one, which we've already mentioned, I don't know how many times already.
But let me show you this here. This is 917 vibrations in northern Cal. Then it moves up. It moves up north the next day. The day after that, it's still there and still up there. The next day after that, it's coming together from the top to the bottom into the middle. And then it's in the middle by itself on 921. That's today. So we can see movement with these vibrations happening along the lineament, which they're visualizing it here, and the Walker Lane goes on the backside of these mountains here, and all the way up the coast, all the way up up into here. So,
well, you see a lot of the same usual places go off too.
Yeah,
you can almost count it like, okay, right there in the middle, it's swarming out there, or the next day it'll swarm up in Vancouver Island and then down on the California border, and then the following day it'll start kind of coming together in the center again. It's a pretty repeating pattern with them tremors.
yeah, and what we're going to go right back to. We're going to do October 1st, 1987 now.
Yeah,
go ahead, Canuck.
Yeah, which is the Whittier Narrows quake, which we've already talked about before, previous, because in our San Jacinto stuff, because 87 was the same year as the Superstition Hills and Elsinore Ranch that we talked about in the last episode. So here we are back again, and you can go and reconstruct 87. Well, I already know, because I've already looked at a bunch of stuff already. There was a big Gulf of Alaska quake in 87. So here we are back to the same thing again, right? it's closing in from
Right.
multiple sides.
Right here. And here it's January of that year. What was the year? The Whittier Narrows? October. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we're going to start in January
And
of
come up. And I bet you're going to find
1987.
the same thing again. We're doing it live.
Right, doing it live, baby. Alaska pops with a 6.8 offshore.
Yeah. Oh, it gets bigger because the Gulf of Alaska quake.
On the other side, Sandwich Islands are popping with a 7.
Yeah.
So, and then El Salvador had a little 4 in the middle.
Yeah, because there's one in 87 Gulf
Colombia
of
has
Alaska.
a 6.
It's like a high 7 or an 8 when we get to it. I just don't remember the exact date.
Offshore, let's see, 6.8. Panama had a 6.3.
Yeah, so see, there's Central America.
Central America, Alaska, and Sandwich Islands popping. Then February, nothing. Wait, earthquakes in this. Why did they stop the list?
I don't know. Sometimes they do that, or they don't finish the list. But I forget what I was looking up that year before. So I must not have used the Wikipedia article. I must have went in deeper.
That's weird, dude. They don't have it after February.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure there was.
But the by magnitude, the larger magnitudes happen. Let's see. Let me do it by date here. There you go, April 1st.
I'm pretty sure there was big Gulf of Alaska quakes in both 87 and 88.
January was Sandwich Islands a 7. Argentina was April 1st, had a 7. Chile, March 5th, had 7.6 and a 7. Ecuador, March 6th, had a 7.2. Killed a lot of people. Alaska pops in November. And Chile had in September had a 7.2. So we have Sandwich Islands, Alaska, Central America. So all that whole lineament up and down was activated with 7s or better.
Yeah. And you have to remember 2 years before that was this time of year, September 19th, 1985, was the big Mexico City quake. And then we talked about 86 because that was Palm Springs, Oceanside, which I'll get into more when we do the offshore faults. But we mentioned all this stuff before in the lead up to the 87 Superstition Hills and all that. So this stuff, like you could go out more years, like you could go within 2 years of whatever. If you're like just like what we did on the previous one, we went 1 year before and then 1 year after. Well, if you start doing that, you're going to see that all these big quakes are all running in together, right?
So what we're saying is that from here all the way around, down through Mexico, through central Mexico, all the way through Peru, all the way to Sandwich Islands out here, there seems to be a repetitive recurrence of something. We don't know we haven't narrowed down the time frame, but within a year on either side of one quake, you can see, and let's say you started with one quake and say, okay, I'm going to look at this other quake because it happened in the same year. And if you looked at the criteria of what we used for the quake A and applied it to quake B, you would see the same thing. It's really uncanny on how things are working. Just very, very strange.
Yeah. So when you start seeing like 7s in the Mid-Atlantic region and all that, it's not good.
Oh no! Hey, if you see 7s out there, look out. What is it? The Rick James out there in the middle, just south of Greenland. When that starts to pop off, we're going to see some activity.
Yeah,
that's out here. So
and
we see it.
Yeah, and when I think about that, well, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is moving everything including
moving
South
North
America,
America.
too, right?
Yeah.
Moving both North America and South America if there's bigger quakes down on the southern mid-Atlantic ridge. See, it's all the same thing.
Right. Which has gotten quiet, by the way, lately. Very strange.
Yeah.
All right. Well, drill down into. We did the northern part of.
So this is
Elsinore.
So this is Whittier. So
Really, Whittier.
Yeah, the northern part of Elsinore. Well, next we're going to do Chino.
Right.
Yeah. So now I got to find the right one here.
Yeah, I have one little small one, but
it's just super small.
Yeah, Chino Fault is along the eastern Chino Hills region from Corona in Riverside County to Los Serranos, Chino Hills area, San Bernardino County in southern Cal. Chino Fault and Whittier Fault are the two upper branches of the Elsinore Fault, which is part of the trilateral split of the San Andreas Fault system. What's trilateral mean? The right lateral strikes that fault substrate of 1 millimeter.
What they mean by that is the San Andreas, Elsinore, and San Jacinto are the three branches of the San Andreas in SoCal. But that's not really true, because when we get into the other faults off the coast, I'll explain that better. So it's actually a lot more than trilateral. But this is all in like the super new studies. So
correct.
Yeah. So when this article was made, they're only referring to the southern San Andreas, and it's 3 trilateral parts. But you're going to find out it's a lot more than trilateral. Once we get on to Newport, Inglewood, Rose Canyon, and all the other ones off the coast. Palos Verdes we've mentioned before, but we're going to find out all the other ones that go off the coast.
Chino Hills earthquake happened in 2008 at 11:42 a.m. on July 29, and magnitude 5.4 was on Chino Hills, east-southeast of downtown Los Angeles, about 45 kilometers or 28 miles. Movement on the oblique slip fault resulted in a maximum mercantile of strong, 6. Though there were no deaths, 8 people were injured and caused considerable damage in the numerous structures throughout. Chino Hills earthquake was caused by an oblique slip faltering with components of both thrust and sinistral strike slip displacement. Preliminary reports cited the Whittier fault as an active cause, but the quake was later determined to have been generated by the Yorba trend. And I remember these. I was there. Identified Caltech. All right. Its epicenter was 3 miles of Chino Hills, and the hypocenter was 9.6 miles deep. Initial estimates and moderate main shock reported as magnitude 5.8, but it was later revised to a 5.4. The main shock was reported felt as far south as San Diego, Tijuana, Mexico, and as far east as Las Vegas, Nevada. It was the strongest earthquake to occur in the greater Los Angeles area since the 1994 earthquake, Northridge.
Yeah, so you already did what I was planning to do. So you did wow. Now what I want to do for this one, since that one was in July, I want
2008. Yeah.
And you're going to find all sorts of interesting stuff.
All right, let's look. Let's go here and look. Let me get up here. Put it in the list. It's in the middle, so we're just going to go ahead and do that same year. And we'll put share this tab. As you can see, in 2008, there was one between 8 and 9, 12 7s, 168 6s, and 1,750 or 768 5 to 5.9s. So a lot of activity that day.
Dang, that year, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, 1,948 earthquakes. Actually, it's for the year before and the year after, it's smaller. It's 100 less than 2009, and it's 300 less than in 2007. Weird. All right, so here we go. That happened in what month you're looking at?
July 29.
All right, so January. Haida Gwaii popped with a 6.6 and a 6.4.
See, so here we go again.
Yeah. Haida Gwaii a 6.1. Oregon popped with a 6.3. And that's just January. February. Tarapaca, Chile 6.3. Sandwich Islands 6.6. The Northern Atlantic Ocean, February 8 had a 6.9. Again, it's kind of odd. If we get a quake on the Elsinore Fault, we're seeing earthquakes happen in the northern mid-Atlantic. That's weird. In the Sandwich Islands.
Every time I've heard Canucks say that too.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it makes sense because it's pushing North America. Where's the North America Pacific boundary? The San
Right.
Andreas, right? So to me,
Right.
it makes sense. It's pushing on it. It's going to adjust on the western side of North America. That's what it does.
Well, you're proving that point, which is really good. Svalbard had a 6.2 in February as well. I don't know where the Shetland are. I think aren't they down there by the Sandwich Islands?
Yep.
Yeah. So that had a pretty 6.8 down there.
Yep. So pushing up.
Yep. And Lincolnshire. I don't know where the hell Lincolnshire is.
But you are seeing a repeating pattern.
Right. We are. Then March.
Like it's repeating so much, I can guess it. Without
Prince Edward Islands.
Yeah, that Prince Edward Islands is south of South Africa there.
Right. That was a 6.
And it's actually I think Prince Edward Islands is the
6.2 of the Aleutians.
antipode of offshore Pacific Northwest, I think.
In April, Sandwich Islands had a 6. Guatemala had a 6.1. The Aleutians had 6.4, 6.6. Illinois, USA, had a 5.4. That's that other limit that goes up through the Great Lakes. Am I wrong or?
Yeah. That would be like the Great Lakes tectonic
And New Caledonia was going apeshit. So, but that's not related to what we're at. I don't want to get distracted. Brazil came with a 5.2. The Atlantic Ocean 6.5. And in April. Sandwich Islands again and the Auckland Islands 6.1 and a 6.1. And New Caledonia again just going ape turd. May. The Aleutian Islands came with a 6.6. Colombia 5.9. Iceland 6.1.
Yep.
June. And, Sandwich Islands came with a 7. July. Peru 6.2. Southern Cal popped with a 5.5 July 29. That's on our Elsinore quake right there. So moving beyond it, what else was going on? Antarctica, I don't know where, had a 6.5 and a 6.3. South Atlantic Ocean had a 6. See Antarctica, South Sandwich Islands, or South Antarctica, and then South Atlantic. South Atlantic, yeah, 6.3. And then September, nothing there. October, nothing. November, nothing. I don't know where. It looks like Peru. Papuito 6.8 in December. And then I don't know where Parma is. What does it say? Italian, don't worry about it. All right. So that was that whole year.
Yeah.
So funny thing how, and you're right, it really lends off to the Pacific plate being shoved by the North Atlantic plate up and down the Pacific plate is responding from whatever's happening out there in the Atlantic. When there's a big one in the Atlantic, look out on the West Coast, all the way from South America all the way up.
Yeah, which is the same thing I've found when the big East Coast quakes happened in the past. There was always crazy stuff going on with the Mid-Atlantic, Iceland, all those areas. So now what we've basically done so far tonight, we did the Elsinore main part, and we did the two northern parts. So we did
Right.
both Whittier and Chino Hills.
Chino Hills, yeah.
Chino Hills. So
These dirty hills.
Yeah, we've shown the pattern, and we've went super in depth because we did like every one, right? But we found out it was doing the similar things each time. Just depended how big the quakes were that were happening, right?
Right. I'm not even looking at the size of the quakes, except for the ones that happened in the Atlantic. Those were all large quakes.
Yep. So now we're going to go south to Baja.
Okay.
And we're going to do the easiest one first, 2010, 7.2.
Oh, you're going to do Laguna Salada?
Yeah, because now they say Laguna Salada is part of Elsinore.
Okay.
If you read all the new studies. So now we have to do the southern extension of Elsinore, right?
Okay.
And you remember that one too, because it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, 1892 it popped.
Yeah, I'll talk about that after, but it's easier
Okay.
to do 2010 first.
2010, Laguna Salada. I remember that one. Is thought to be the origin of the 2010 Baja California quake. Prior to this, the fault had not produced a major earthquake for over 100 years, since the 1892.
Yep.
Laguna Salada fault is the probable southern continuation of the Elsinore fault zone in southern Cal. These faults are considered to be secondary cohorts of the San Andreas fault, which I disagree. And such are some of the strike-slip motion between the North American plate and the Pacific plate. I agree with that for sure.
Yep. So anyway, most people remember that one that were in California because they felt it all the way up.
Yeah, Eastern, right?
Yeah.
Eastern.
Into LA. So of course, what I do, I say, well, where did that come from? So I take the date and go backwards.
All right. So we're going back on 2009.
Well, no, it was April, right?
So you want to do 2010? You want to look at that?
Yeah, we have to look at 2010 first, and you're gonna see it right off before we get too far.
All right.
So just start with January again.
All right. So looking at January, scrolling down here, I'll put this on here. You can see California offshore Ferndale at a 6.5.
Yep.
In January. So February comes in and Chile pots with an 8.8. Argentina 6.3.
Yeah, so there's the big pattern of near California or almost California getting a big one when there's a gigantic quake in South America. So that was the first thing I found when I started looking up. I said, look, 8.8 in Chile. There it
Right.
goes again.
Yeah.
So that's
The 2010
That's
Chile earthquake is the most significant earthquake to impact Chile since the 1960 Valdivia quake. It had a robust aftershock sequence and tsunami warnings were issued. 53 countries, 350 to 500 deaths were attributed to the earthquake were caused by a tsunami wave approximately 24 meters high, 80 feet, that struck the coast of Constitucion, Chile. 80-foot tidal wave. Oh, with that 8.8. Oh my land. That happened on.
And see, people forget because if it's not like in an area that they remember, they don't
Right.
realize that this has been happening over and over.
The Salta, Argentina was a aftershock, they're calling it. Once thought to be an aftershock, but maybe not. But it was later deemed to be a separate event, was a 6.3 in Argentina. Yeah, so that's a little more interior. So the Chilean quake is, let me see where this is. I want to see where exactly. That's Italy. Itata province. Where the hell is that?
And like for this stuff that we're doing right now, like if I was going even more in depth, I'd go in and add all the volcanoes that were going off,
Central.
figure out where they
Right.
were. I'd go and add all the solar stuff, which I've already done for some of the other major quakes in
Right.
history. Right. Because eventually, like what we could probably do is take like one quake and explain where it came from using all sorts of different things, which we may get
Correct.
to eventually. But right now, I think
We're just learning. Yeah.
yeah, it's better for us to understand the capabilities of these faults because everybody's focusing on all these other ones that are the more exciting media ones, and they're forgetting about all
Like
the
the
other
San Andreas.
Yeah. Well, everybody's all
Right.
obsessed with the San Andreas, but
Right.
that's why one of these faults is going to go 7 point whatever, and everybody's going to say, "Well, what?
The chuck?
That's not on the San Andreas." Well, duh.
Okay, so Chile
Why do
popped.
you need to know about it?
Then in March, after Chile and Argentina popped, Chile had a 6.1. Valparaiso had a 6.0. Antofagasta had a 6.3. Chile Barbados again 6.1. Then Barbados again 6.6. Yeah, robust is right. O'Higgins, Chile 6.9. And then O'Higgins again 7. And then O'Higgins again 6.0. This is all in,
So Chile was having a history.
March.
2000.
Yeah.
Wow.
2000.
Major quakes. Chile again, Atacama region had a 6.3. Then Mali region of Chile, a 6.0. All just in March.
Wow.
So those rips were insane. In April, Chile again, 6.0. Baja California had a 7.2. That's in Guadalupe, Victoria region. I think that's in the middle. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the one we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
31 lost homes in Baja California quake. 35,000 people. Well, that's actually in the that's where we're talking about. That's in the delta at the top of Baja. So that's 7 through. 7.2 happened in April. All right. So you got Salt Chile going, ape turd, and a pretty strong one. I didn't know about Chile going off back then. I think I heard about it, but I didn't really focus in on it. The 7.2, I remember that. I was cooking. I almost fell over.
Yeah, because it basically
Bering,
reverberated right up the Elsinore fault. So that's why everybody felt it.
So that same month in April, the Bering Sea popped twice, 6.5 and a 6.3. Back down to May, Chile Barbados again 6.3.
cows. You should see the cow puns in the
No, I never saw that. No. So now Hezbollah's blowing up
the rockets hit
Looking up
cows, blowing up cows or something now instead of the chickens like they did that other time.
Cow puns and they're getting banned by the
Yeah, so
It
much
should make the green people real happy. Well, in May, the Pacific Antarctic Ridge, right? A couple of sixes. Peru pops with a 6-1. Brazil pops with a 6-5. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, I know up from the Antarctic, right? Pops up with a 6-3.
Yep, and you have to remember what's happening in 2010 is also leading into 2011.
Right.
Japan.
We'll get there. We'll get there. I'm staying away from the Western Pacific. I'm just staying with the Eastern at the moment. Costa Rica had a 6 in June. I want to see what else. It's harder to read now. Oaxaca had a 6.2, killed one person. In July, Chile popped with a 6.3. Bali, Chile. Calama was the first one. 6.3 and a 6.5 in Chile. Fox Islands, Alaska had a 6.7. Fox Islands had a 6. Philippines went ape turd. Bunch of those. Really bad. Mindanao. August, we jump into the Aleutian Islands, had a 6.4. Jalisco, Mexico had a 6.1. September, the Adrian Islands had a 6.5. Canterbury, where the hell? Southwest Pacific Ocean Islands. So I think that's Canterbury's that's New Zealand, right? Yeah. So that's not, I'll stay away from that. Bio, Chile had a 6.3 in September. And then October, Adrian Islands again, 6.4, 6.0. Pacific Antarctic Ridge again, a 6.4. November, South Pacific Ocean. All right, 6.0, the South Pacific Ocean. It does seem to be on this year in 2010. It's kind of going southwest in the Pacific. December.
One Ian's asking, I wonder how many of those are tests. Well, they can tell the difference between if it's
the signal is different
between that and the regular earthquake.
December was South Sandwich Islands, had a 6.5.
Because the Russian arms depot that just blew up there in Russia was 2.6 magnitude. Right. So it still registers as a quake, but they can tell.
And that's pretty much on the Eastern Pacific area. So we saw a lot of Antarctic ridges. We saw Southern Atlantic and the Mid-Atlantic, and we also saw the Southern Pacific go. So it seemed like the energy kind of went south because Chile was banging 6.7, 6.9, crazy, 6.6, 6.1, 6.3, 6.0, and a 6, all that year. So that's kind of like a full rip of Chile, you know. And they say, oh, it didn't happen all at once. Right. Because that's how Chile operates. Even the 9.5 Chile, was it 9.5? Yes. That it didn't happen at once. it started up in the north and it moved south. And then in the southern one, that's when it really let loose because it had several sevens in it, and all of a sudden, bam. So
Yeah, because it's easier us to find more detailed info since 1900. As soon as you get 1899 and lower, you have to dig way more to find out where everything is coming
right.
from.
Yeah, 1800s, we can get a lot of South America, but it's really tough up here in the north.
Yeah. So then I went see. I wanted to see what I could find on 1892, and so I looked up because it was in the same place, basically in 1892, and they called it the Laguna Salada quake back then too, and it was like 7.2, 7.3. So basically the same thing that happened in 2010 on that same fault. So then I tried to go down and find more information on like what happened because it was near the start of the year. So I went back into 1891 to find my stuff, and I found out there was big quakes in El Salvador right before.
Good question, Eric. Clem says, how do they? You'll find that USGS when they, often, this is kind of off subject, but he asked me a question: how did they downgrade a 7.4 down to a 7? Weeks after it came out. It's like, well, they do, and sometimes they raise it up, and sometimes they remove it altogether.
Or they go back in time based upon new information they have in a computer model, and then they readjust
Right.
the magnitude of one that happened in the past. So it just depends on how they do it.
And sometimes they miss it completely.
Yeah, which I find a lot of times with the historical ones, they go back and change them from what
They edit it. Yeah.
everybody thought it was. But that's just what they're doing. But as long as it's obvious enough for me to find it, they can.
That's because they use this new thing now. They don't use the size, seismogram or whatever. The mercantile,
change it
whatever.
to whatever they want. I'll
Right.
still be able to find out where it came from. So
Yeah.
they can try and move it a mag if they want. I don't really care.
I'm with you there. Say these are strong quakes. You say, okay, it was a strong quake. All right.
So it had to come from somewhere, because just like tonight, we were doing 4s for Whittier Fault, right? So we traced where the 4s came from all the other massive big quakes that were ongoing in the same time period. So unless they started hiding every single quake for like many years, but it depends on which sources you're going to, because when you go back farther, you have to use even more sources to prove where it's going. Where like what we've been doing tonight are pretty straightforward because they're all in the 1900s. So we could pretty much use Wikipedia and a bunch of other things.
Well, Wikipedia doesn't have all the quakes either. They have most of them.
No, they don't.
Sometimes they're missed.
Yeah.
And,
so
and
if that happens, then I go to other sources, because there's a whole bunch of other sources. Like I can use that one. Now I haven't mentioned it tonight, but it's the GHEA, the Global Historical Earthquake Archive, which goes back to the year 1000. So in that, it lists all the big quakes that have been determined that they were a thing in whatever year going back, 1,000 years basically. But in that one, they're focusing on really big ones. So say like high 6s and up. So you can find the information. You just have to go to another source. Well, if I wanted to find all the historical ones in China, well, then I'd have to go to the China database and go back as far as they could do it, right? So this is the example that I give you. You can reconstruct all these things and see the same pattern. It just requires more work, and you have to look at more databases. And it's the same thing if you want to add volcanoes in. It's the same thing if you want to add wildfires in. It's the same if you want to add solar stuff. like whether it's a geostorm, whether solar flares were happening, you have to use all these different sources of information. Which, like when I first started this, I was just interested in the quake part, right? So I was trying to reconstruct how that quake ended up there. But then when I started getting into all this other stuff, I said, look, there's wildfires here around these same times. There's solar stuff going on. Now everything we did tonight, we didn't go in and do any solar stuff, right?
No.
But if we were really going into this, I bet you'd go in and find all this crazy solar stuff going on, because whenever I've looked up any of the really big quakes, the only one I haven't found that there wasn't a lot of solar stuff going on was Alaska 64. And that was super solar minimum, but we were getting geomagnetic storms from cosmic rays at that time. Because we can still get geomagnetic storms for other reasons. So, but every other one, when I looked up all the nines, there was always something crazy. We were getting a whole bunch of flares, geomagnetic storms. It's all right nuts. Of all the ones that I did in, say, the 1900s so far, which I've done a whole bunch already, but like we could do a show and do like 2 hours on like each major quake that we know about, and just do that for like 2 hours, right? Because you could explain wildfires and solar stuff and everything else, which I've started incorporating that with a bunch of the main quakes that I've been trying to do. But now with this, I'm just trying to get people to understand that San Andreas and Cascadia and all that stuff is not, and New Madrid, they're not all the main ones, because you can get big quakes on all these other faults that people don't.
Well, what you're saying there is, San Andreas is the granddaddy of them all on the west in southern Cal. These other ones can produce mid-sevens all the way out to sea on any one of these San Andreas fault zone or greater fault zones. And what's interesting is, if the San Andreas did go, it'll go a hell of a lot bigger than these. And the power it would be substantial.
Yeah,
because it goes deep, very, very, very deep into it goes down to the lithosphere all the way down, versus all these other ones are surface and subsurface ones. They don't go very deep, but 15, 30 miles maybe, but San Andreas goes a lot deeper. And
but we'll get into it more, like once we get into the faults that are going offshore.
Right.
If you read all the new stuff, they basically can do the same thing as the San Andreas. The only difference is they'll be making tsunamis.
And yeah, they're shorter than the San Andreas, because the San Andreas is much longer. It's 800 miles. But an 800-mile fault, if the whole thing ripped, which it's never done before, but if it did, all these other faults would go with it.
This is what they're finding, though, because when they start connecting them together, there's as all those offshore SoCal ones are as long as the southern San Andreas, or longer, because they actually go down and go into
Mexico. Yeah. The chicken leg, baby. The chicken leg, I tell you.
But we'll get into that. That's the next
two away. Yeah, the next one we're going to go offshore, and then we'll go San Diego at the same time, and then we'll go.
Yeah, because we're going to do Newport, Inglewood, Rose Canyon, and now with the 2024 articles that just come out now, San Miguel Vallecito's fault, which is in Baja. And it's all connected. Now they say Newport, Inglewood, Rose Canyon. That's the hot off the press stuff.
San Felipe Crack goes right across, right up in there.
And when we get into that, you'll find out that that's what it's doing, and it's happened in the past. It's just people haven't been paying attention, which is the common thing.
Well, they don't know to look because they're not looking.
Yeah, and then we'll reconstruct those ones too, because I know the quakes that are on that fault. Yeah,
Yep.
because I looked them up, and then we'll do the same thing again and figure out where they came from. Probably just do it live, and you'll be saying, "Oh,
Do it live, baby.
So
All
I
right.
sound like I'm crazy when I say all this stuff till we start doing it live.
Right.
And
So
and
we're talking now about the Laguna Salada. We have two dates, 1892 and 2010. We looked up 2010. Do you want to touch 1892?
yeah, the only one I could find that was right close to that time period, there was a big quake in El Salvador right before it, 1891.
All right.
And so, and it's called like the 1891 El Salvador quake. So if you do a search for it, it should come up.
How big was that one? Do they say?
Yeah, I think it was like they think like high 6, low 7. So it'd be about the same as what the 1892 Baja quake was. So it's in the same range. It gets harder. They debate it the farther it goes back. So sometimes there's a discrepancy on what it is. But if it's big enough to cause major damage, well, then you can find information on it. Now, I never went beyond that anymore.
In April 1892, April 19th, California had a 6.4. California on April 21 had a 6.4. And then, then they jumped to 1895. And then 1899. 1895, Missouri popped with a 6.6. And in October 31st of Missouri of 1895, the 1899, September 4th, an 8.2 in Alaska.
Hey, actually, I want to touch on that just for a sec, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just September 4th, and then September 10th, they had two of them, 7.4 in Yak Attack, and then another 8.2.
In 1899?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
and if you actually look into that further, which I have, using the GHEA thing, it was actually there was multiple Gulf of Alaska quakes, at least 4 Yakutat, and I think there was 2 other ones.
Was the Yakutat, was that the year that big tsunami hit that and killed killed a few people and fish rode that thing up?
Yakutat, yeah, it had had the big tsunami, but the one that was even bigger was the 1958 Latuya quake. But I don't want to get into that right now. But that we've talked about the Yakutat ones before because it was like a series of quakes. So there was like 4 high 7s just for Yakutat.
Well, I see two of them, they say that are 8.2, and then the other one was a 7.4. They only have 3 of them listed.
Yeah, but if you actually go in and read the studies, they changed the mags a bit and said there was more of them. So I think it's like 4 of them.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think they said that the biggest one was maybe 8, but they said probably at least high, like a high 7. So 7.8, 7.9, all that type of stuff. Because I've read a bunch of the studies. But when I went in, because that Global Historical Earthquake Archive thing, they take reports from all over and then they kind of try and confirm it based upon the studies. Like it's a European site, that's where it's based. It's based in Europe, but they take the historical quakes from all over the world going back to the year 1000. And if they're big enough and cause enough damage or whatever, they put them in there. So if you actually click on the quake, sometimes it says mag, sometimes it doesn't. It gives you whatever the range was, whatever they called it back then. So like severity. severity, because they used to have the Roman numeral scale that was like
Mhm.
9, 10, all that. So
Mhm.
some of them, when you go back far enough, it'll give
It just
that.
touches severity. They don't have any real way of finding out what it was.
Yeah,
The
some of
magnitude.
them may have like a mag on it if there's been enough studies on it that they've determined the mag. But it just depends. Well, of course, the farther you go back, it's going to be harder to determine exactly what the magnitude is. Now, even now, they're like doing studies going way back years, trying to redo all these historical quakes over again and give them an actual magnitude. So it just depends on what year it is and what ones. It's usually whatever country it was in. There's people there that are trying to figure out how it happened.
September 4th. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the earthquakes in United States listed, all the big ones. And
Yeah, because see, they've said the same thing about like the New Madrid quakes in 1811, 1812, that some were 8s. But if you actually go in and read all the studies on it, they say it was a series of 3 big ones that were like high 7.
mhm.
So you'll find all these discrepancies when you go back and start digging into them, because it just depends on what studies they've done and how
Right.
they've changed the mags since whenever the other study that was before said it was bigger. So that's basically what it is. So it's all, which one are you going to decide is the final authority? The one that said it 30 years ago or the one that said it last week?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's always the same thing. So I try not to get hung up on that, because
Right.
it doesn't matter if it's high 7, low 8. If it's in the wrong spot, it's not going to be good. So that's the way
It's never any good, dude. It's gonna, yeah, the land, if it's at the surface, it could rip, a mid 7 can rip, 25 feet, or maybe more.
It's like if a big
An 8 is gonna rip more than that. It could rip 50 feet.
If we get a mega quake, to me, an 8.8 and a 9 isn't too much difference. It's
Right. If you saw the ridge crest, the way the ground moved, and the rupture that happened, the rupture was like 60 miles long along this kind of same kind of north west from the southeast direction right into the Coastal Range. Then it banged up against the Coastal Range and couldn't do anything because the Coastal Range is a welded tuff that shut down the Owens Valley at the bottom of it, and then there's no more volcanics until you get up further north.
Now, if we were being really crazy on Elsinore, you could even go up to like the current years, which that article only went to 87 that we were using for Whittier and all that stuff. But we've had smaller quakes that have been 3, like high 3s or low 4s, since all that on Elsinore.
Right.
It's just we haven't gone into those in detail. So like there's been recent ones, because the ones down there by the Palomar Observatory, they're pretty close to that. And whatever year that was, 2023, I think. So like last year or the year before, there's a bunch of all those ones that have been recent that are like high 3s that are on, like, would be considered close to the Elsinore. So you could get even more detailed with the most recent stuff if you wanted to. I was just trying to make the point that I don't know what they're talking about saying that Elsinore is the quietest. Well, not really. But see, they make those statements. It's
because it translates through the Anza Gap, pushes over, Anza Gap from World War II, but and we call it Anza Gap because it jumps off the Elsinore through Anza, then it goes on to the San Jacinto and goes up. Yeah. So that pressure seems to be pushed north, northeast a little bit, and then northwest following those faults, because the San Jacinto is a little more greasy than the Elsinore. And it moves a lot more. I mean, a lot more. And we talked about that last rabbit hole.
Yeah. But then if you go back into the 1800s, if you look under the LA Basin quakes, because the record starts in like 1769, they're trying to figure out where all those ones happened. And a lot of times they don't know exactly. They're trying to guess where they were based upon what the Spanish settlers were dealing with back in the 1800s. So they'll probably find, like if they were going into super detail, we'll probably find if there was a bunch, probably the same thing. Like what we looked up tonight was just in the 1900s. There's probably a bunch of stuff happening on those same faults in the 1800s. It's just people felt them and said, "Oh, well, there's a shake. Whoopee, let's go." But back then, it wouldn't be big buildings to fall down. It would be just small log cabins, and with the indigenous people would be their teepees. So it wouldn't be as devastating because you wouldn't have all the big infrastructure to fall down, right? Because the missions would be probably the biggest buildings that they would have back then, right? In the 1800s, because the churches would be the biggest thing that they would have constructed at that time. And that's why it's always the quakes are recorded by the missions, right? So they name it after the mission in the 1800s, because that's who was writing down when all this stuff happened. And it's the same thing in San Francisco, in Santa Barbara. So when I looked up all those things, I had to find the databases that, well, they would have been Spanish, right, originally, because they were the Spanish settlers, but they're still at all these places that exist now. They're usually at some museum or library or whatever, so you can go and find it, because people were writing down the dates and times of when they felt quakes, right?
Just to clarify that it was Latuya Bay in 1958 that I was talking about, the mega tsunami.
Yeah, that was really big.
The Yakutat, 7.8 earthquake, 1958.
Yeah. But Yakutat had a tsunami with it too, just not as big as Latuya Bay.
Right.
So.
I get them mixed up. I know both of them had it. It's like, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, that's Elsinore.
Yeah, Elsinore just doesn't have a lot of data that we can talk about, so we had to extrapolate and go down further. We'd have to look up a lot more on Laguna Salada. I think it only had 2 quakes on that as well, 1892 and then 2010. And then that's it, just on the wiki.
Yeah, because see, they didn't even know it was connected to Elsinore until this last one happened in 2010, because they found that since using the LiDAR studies. Because there's a section, I think it's the Okatilla well section or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how they figured out it. Laguna Salada connected to Elsinore. If you go in and read about it, because I remember reading
the SCEDC says the remote location of this earthquake in Laguna Salada in 1892, an essentially an uninhabited area of Baja near Laguna Salada probably kept damage low, but a determination its epicenter was an accurate measure of its magnitude difficult. It was near the magnitude 7 surface rupture along the Laguna Salada fault zone and in the southern constitution of the Elsinore fault zone in northern Baja California, Mexico, however, has recently been studied and seems to be right age to coincide with the event. Still, the quake managed to leave cracks in large buildings in San Diego and cause a general alarm among people. In Carrizoso Stage Depot in San Diego County, adobe buildings were destroyed. At Jamul, and the walls of the stone kilns at the cement works were cracked, in Paradise Valley, a church and school were destroyed. Shock was severe even in Los Angeles, causing alarm among some. Though the damage was minimal in Mexico, towers of Ensenada, El Alamo, and San Quentin were shaken violently. Amazingly, no fatalities were reported. And that was a magnitude 7 on the Laguna Salada. So 2010, 1892, do the math, 100 years apart, 120. So maybe 140 years, right? Thereabouts. Pretty insane for the Laguna Salada fault. I think next week we'll go to the coast and we'll get focused on the Newport Inglewood and off the coast, Rose Canyon fault, and because we're already 2 hours and 10 minutes, don't want it to go any further, and don't want to fade out too quickly.
Yeah, so we got 2 hours on the Elsinore, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we went through a lot of quakes, a lot of years, looked at the patterns and see if there's anything that really persists. Can you call it? It's subjective. Everything we said was subjective, but trying to make a case for these lineaments and what they mean, that they're not just fancy words, that there is a historical prequel and follow up afterward. And
I'm primarily interested in North America, but I've expanded out in all sorts of other places too.
Well,
so it just depends.
we'll continue that, but right now these rabbit holes do have a direction that's going, and we're talking about the main faults, identifying them and what they persist and what can they go, and how they function. And I think we will try to give you a little more understanding, whether it's a strike slip or oblique and or thrust fault, and explaining, okay, this side thrusts up and over that side. So we'll try to get you that here, the next ones, because these ones will be important off the coast. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them that are pretty well known. And there's some ones that are inland too, that we get a lot of quakes off in Palomar, Palomar Mountain. So Temescal Fault cruises through, and Escondido area. And so, a lot of stuff happened up there.
And if you read the new stuff on Puente Hills Thrust Fault, it basically is under both Whittier and Chino both. So it's pretty interesting.
It runs pretty deep then.
Yeah, because it's like a big ramp thing and goes underneath them. So that's why they say now that the Whittier 87 quake was on Puente Hills based upon the depth of it and where it was. So this is why they change stuff once they scan the area better. Even though back years ago they were saying it was on the Whittier Fault itself. So now we don't know about all those other ones that we looked at today. Even though they're saying they were on Whittier, well, were they all on Puente Hills?
One of them said it wasn't on Whittier. They say it was on another fault, like the Norwalk Fault or whatever, or one of that. But needless to say.
Yeah, the problem is all these ones are interacting. Right? And we don't know that until we...
Well, the instruments are better today than they were back then. So I think it's really, we shouldn't get bogged down in, arguing, okay, it's on this fault, that fault. But if we understand these kinds of faults, and if it's a, strike slip or an oblique normal fault or a thrust fault, once we get to understand that these things, so when there is another quake, we say, okay, well, that's probably on this fault, and it probably says this type of strike slip or whatever, and then we can, virtually give, information out that's helpful, and kind of a roundabout fitting for the information given to people.
Yeah, like we're doing each one individually, but
Mhm.
in each one segment or whatever we're doing now, they're saying that it can go whatever 6.5
Right.
to 7.5.
Mhm.
So that's what they're saying. It doesn't matter if it's the Pointy Hills thrust fault or Elsinore.
And they can kick off other
when
faults
you're-
around. Now that they're like, the cat's out of the bag, well, this fault can kick off all the other faults. And, and again, I revert to
That's
a
what's going
1937's dream. And he said, I counted at least 4 different earthquakes. And one wasn't so bad. It shook them. It was farther away. And how he described it, you can tell it was farther away because it was a low kind of shaking. And then the next one came in about a half hour later, and it was a bigger one, and then a little one, and then the massive one.
And
So,
John Dolan has said that about the thrust faults, multiple going off at one time.
Right.
Well, I've heard him say 900 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So
the history says it'll happen.
Yeah.
It's not if, it's when, and there's not a damn thing we can do to stop it.
No.
So.
Except try to get out of its way. Because if it's too
Yeah,
big, it's not
right.
going to
Look,
matter.
I moved out of California, but I got to get my daughter and my dad out of there.
Yeah. Well, we haven't done all the Arizona faults yet.
I know. I'm already looking into them.
That's another episode.
The hurricane fault's like 50 miles east of me. So I'm in between a couple of them.
Well, Death Valley could get you pretty good too.
Well, Death Valley can go 8. Yes, it can. Panamint too, it can go 8, 8.5. And as the Owens Valley can go 9, but because it's a bastard. But then again, whatever. Thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to close up with there? You want to summarize your thoughts or?
Well, those ones are just like the Eastern California shear zone faults, which we'll get to at some point. When it will be. I want to do up the coast first, and then we'll go backwards, I guess.
We'll spend a couple of weeks out on the coast.
Yeah.
We'll get up to Lompoc, and then we'll come back out and say, okay, maybe we'll do one day do these, and then the next day do that.
Because there's still more east-west faults above.
I think my buddy's popping another top. It is Saturday, right? Yeah. I think it is.
Because we still have to do Ventura, Peters Point.
Yeah, that's
Santa Barbara, all that stuff.
That'll probably be next Saturday.
Yeah.
So Wednesday we'll do the coast. We'll try to get these all in the coast.
I don't know if we'll get all of them because there's.
I know there's 4 main ones.
Yeah, 4 main ones coming off the coast. So we'll see.
Well, there's not a whole lot of data out there to it says okay we can identify them, but
there is. I've been reading all the 2024 ones.
Yeah.
So there's like brand new stuff for.
Well, then that's
because they've been freaking out about the off the coast ones since about 2020, which is why they have Dolan's out there and Goldfinger's out there trying to do the turbidites and John Shaw and all these other people that do the SoCal faults now are all off out there in the ocean trying to figure out what all
they said. Wait, there's faults out to sea. Oh no.
Yeah, like Dolan right now is trying to get them interested in the thrust faults that are on land, but he hasn't mentioned about the offshore stuff yet because they're still doing all the studies out there. Because I think he's trying to get them that you got to worry about more than just San Andreas and San Jacinto and Elsinore. And I think that's what he's trying to do. Now, I don't know. Lucy, to me, is trying to downplay everything, but I don't know why.
Lucy's cool. She don't want people to go crazy. She don't want people running amok.
Yeah. But everybody's going to be mad when one of these ones happen. They're going to say, well, why did you not tell us about this? What?
Yeah.
Even though all the things are out there, you just got to go find them and read them.
Right.
Because right now, there's only certain ones that people that are talking about it. And you have to go digging deep to get them. Because they always go to
2 hours, 19 minutes. All right.
Yeah.
We can still talk. I just got to end this thing here. Hey, remember everybody, we do things over here Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 9 on twitch.tv/Joe Slick Live. We have this kind of talk and more
Rabbit
during
Hole Wednesdays
and
and
Rabbit Hole
Saturdays.
Wednesday and Saturdays right now. So I appreciate you all. Appreciate your tips, your subscriptions. Thank you for helping out. And remember, don't get none on you. I'm Joe Slick. Good night, Clem. Good night, Canuck. Talk to you
good, Clem.
soon.
Good night.
Love you all. Good night, everybody.